Hey guys, so before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to let you know, if you haven't heard already, that this week I'm doing a big enrollment for my signature program, the Online Summit program. Now, specifically, I'm looking for no more than 10 hikers who want to get strong and pain-free over the next 12 weeks so they can conquer every adventure. Now, if you want to find out more, just shoot me an email to rowan@summitstrength.com.au with the words "tell me more," and we can have a little bit of a chat and really just see if and how the program might be a good fit for your goals and your situation. So that's rowan@summitstrength.com.au. I'll leave that address in the show notes below. If you are thinking about getting help with your training, I would absolutely love to hear from you. So that's enough about that. Let's get into today's episode. Hey, my name is Rowan Smith and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare and conquer your upcoming hike, trek or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for. Let's get into today's episode. All right, hello guys. Today I want to talk through my journey as a coach and as a trainer. Now, the reason I want to talk about this today is if you've been following this podcast from the very start, you probably know quite a bit about me. Now, this podcast has been going for a little while now. We've racked up quite a few episodes. And if you've been listening since episode 1, you probably have a good idea around who I am, where I come from, and what got me into this space in regards to training for hiking, and why I consider myself in a really good position to help hikers. But recently, I've been talking to quite a few hikers who've only sort of recently discovered me. So they've only recently discovered this podcast, recently discovered one of my articles, or whatever it may be. And they're not quite sure who I am and where I'm coming from with all of this and what my background is and what my education is and all of that. So today I wanted to do a bit of an episode just talking through my journey as a coach and just tell you through all the different facets, all the different iterations of my coaching career and sort of how it's all led to where I am these days. So hopefully at the end you can have a good insight into around, where I'm coming from with all of this, what my background is, and why I do consider myself in to be an incredibly good position to help hikers for their adventures. Now, to start with, we're going to go all the way back to the ripe old age of 15, when I had my first gig as a coach. Now, in those days, I was working as a junior athletics coach with my own sprint coach, actually. But he was also doing sessions for primary age kids for improving their sprinting and improving their, sports performance. And basically, we would go down the local oval a couple of times a week, help about 20 to 30 primary age school kids. They come in, train with us for an hour, trying to get a little bit quicker. And during this time, obviously, you can't teach anything too complex to a big, massive kids. But it was a really interesting learning experience in learning how to take some relatively complex subjects. So things like acceleration, things like core stability, things like braking mechanics and stuff like that, and really simplifying it down into a way that can be taught within the attention span of a group of kids, which is an art in itself if you ever tried it. But that particular skill set that I learned there in regards to simplifying these complex subjects, that's something that I've really held close to me all these years, and it's something I still use today. So that was the very first beginning of my coaching career. Now, when I was 16, I started working as my first gym. Now, at that age, I was a little bit too young to be a trainer. I wasn't qualified to be a trainer, but I was working on a reception in a local gym. And that was where I really began my sort of lifelong education into the worlds of physical performance and strength and conditioning and sports performance and training in general. Because at that age, I knew I wanted to get into this. I had aspirations to work with professional sports further down the line, and I was really driven to learn everything I could from the trainers around me. And I was lucky enough, the actual gym that I worked at, the quality of trainers was incredibly high. And it wasn't just some bro gym where I had a bunch of trainers who didn't really know what they're talking about, which is pretty common in the fitness industry. But I didn't know it at the time, but the trainers I was working with were super, super intelligent. And actually these days, some of them ended up in some really, really incredible positions. One of them's like the national strength and conditioning coach for the Holland's women's hockey. Another one's running one of the top strength and conditioning facilities in Australia. Another one's was working for the NRL as a strength and conditioning coach, or the National Rugby League for the guys who aren't in Australia. So these guys were really, really smart. And I was learning a lot from them. I was trying to emulate them. I was trying to read the books they were reading. And it was really the beginning of my coaching journey. And I was so lucky to get exposed to these guys early on. Now, when I was 18, I finally got qualified as a gym trainer. And I really started sort of helping people actually on the gym floor with their training. So not doing one-to-one sessions so much, but helping people who had random exercise advice, who needed some help with their form, help with their exercises, needed ideas or whatever it may be. And I started doing that almost full time. And that was really where I sort of started getting insight into, how to help people and how to advise people in the right direction. Because at that stage, I had so much theoretical knowledge and knowledge around my own training. Because I've been learning, I've been studying and all of this, and I knew what worked for me. But this is where I sort of really first understood, okay, what works for you, Rowan, doesn't work for everyone else. And in this gym, I was sort of exposed from people. There was sort of lots of young blokes looking to put on muscle. There was older people who were in their 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s, who were sort of coming in the gym trying to improve their quality of life and prevent injury and things like that. We had sort of young mums. We had teenagers coming in. We had this incredibly broad spectrum of clientele coming in. And I started to realize, as every trainer should realize, everyone is a little bit different and needs different approaches for different people. And I was lucky enough to learn that very, very early. Now, when I was 19, I started studying at university of sport and exercise science. And this is a 3-year degree to get deep into this. Now, at this stage, I still had aspirations to go and work in professional sport. And this was sort of the first step towards that. And in this course or this degree, we learned some really, really in-depth stuff around sport and exercise and physical performance. So we learned in-depth anatomy. We learned biomechanics, neuroscience, sports psychology, models of fatigue, all of this really, really in-depth stuff. And in all honesty, a lot of the stuff I didn't use for years and years and years. It really wasn't something that was practical for me right then. But it was really, really good knowledge to learn. And years later, as I got into Summit Strength and as I started applying other things, a lot of this stuff I went back to. I started applying some, principles I learned from these sports psychology lessons. I started applying things I learned from the biomechanics or, using my anatomy a little bit more. And it was really, really, really interesting. Now, when I was 22, I started my first full-time gig as a personal trainer. Now, I was out of university. I had all the time in the world. I was actually over in London at that stage, and I started working first full-time as a personal trainer. And this is where I really sort of realized, okay, you know what? Now is the time. I'm spending 30, 40 hours training people a week, and you learn a lot when you're exposed to that. And I was helping people, with all different sort of shapes and sizes, whether it's for weight loss, muscle development, some sports performance, injury prevention, all of this stuff. And I was really, really exposed to, again, a whole bunch of different people on a whole spectrum of different people aiming for different goals. And this is where I really got in depth in regards to the hands-on stuff. And really learned the little intricacies around coaching, the little intricacies around helping people form, really the little intricacies around just helping people with habits and day-to-day. It was really, really interesting. Now, when I was 23, I was still working at the same gym, but I got offered a job as what we called a health mentor, which is essentially a behavioral change coach. And we did lots and lots of upskilling and learning around different behavioral change techniques. So essentially people would sign up for these packages in the gym, and not only would they get personal training, but they also get these regular coaching touch points in which they come into the gym and we literally just talk for 30 minutes to 60 minutes. We talk through goal setting, we talk through obstacles, we talk through issues, and just help people on the right track. And this is super, super, super interesting because this is a whole different facet of coaching I never explored in depth. I knew it was important. I knew it was very, very beneficial. But just to see the impact this had on people's coaching, people's training, and this people's journey, it was absolutely phenomenal. And a lot of the information I learned over that year or over those couple of years, I really brought back to, what I do these days as a coach and not just a trainer. Now, when I was 25 years old, I came back to Sydney. I got a job at a new gym, and this is where I first started training hikers and trekkers professionally. Now, this was one of these simulated altitude gyms, which I talked quite a bit on this podcast. And here, lots of people come into us to train for things like Kilimanjaro or Everest Base Camp or whatever it may be. Because in Australia, in Sydney, we don't have any altitude to speak of. But people come into these gyms to help prepare for these things because they were going on these trips. And whether or not the simulated altitude training was particularly effective is debatable, and it's something I've talked about quite a bit. Either way, it was where I was first exposed to hikers and trekkers, and this is really interesting in the sense that before that, I'd always been a hiker. I'd always done lots of hikes, but I'd been young. I'd never been super fit. I'd never had any issues, and I never really considered something that needed to be trained for. But this is the first time I came across people who were training for these significant trips, who had issues and aches and pains. They had knee pain or foot pain or back pain. They were sort of concerned about hills. They're concerned about fitting things into their busy life or whatever it may be. And this is where I really first started to realize, okay, hikers actually need help. And when I first started looking for information around this, I also realized the quality of information around this is so poor, or was so poor. And you go onto Google, you'd say how to train for a hike or how to get rid of knee pain. And oh my gosh, the information was just terrible. And it was no surprise that people were sort of frustrated and confused and even a bit anxious around these trips because they just didn't know where to go and what to do. So I did that for a couple of years. And I sort of realized, look, this is an opportunity for me. I love training these guys. It's so satisfying seeing someone send back a photo and they're at the top of Kilimanjaro and at Everest Base Camp, or whatever it may be, send them back and say, look, I've accomplished this and you've helped me in your small way towards that. I loved it. And I also knew there was so much more that I could be doing. And I was kind of a little bit restrained around sort of what we were sort of doing in that particular gym. And that's when the sort of idea around Summit Strength was born. So when I was 26, I stepped out of that gym and launched Summit Strength full-time. Originally, this was sort of an in-person personal training predominantly, and I was focusing on hikers and trekkers in Sydney to get them ready for these trips. And my original intention of this whole thing was I wanted to make it an incredibly comprehensive service for hikers. So I could take all this stuff I've learned over the years, all these different bits and pieces, and really apply them in a whole bunch of different ways for hikers. So I could teach them a little bit of biomechanics in a hiking specific way. I could teach them a little bit, use some of my sports psychology stuff in a little bit of hiking specific way to keep them on track. I could sort of teach them, how to get strong without putting on extra weight, which was coming back to a sort of neuroscience stuff. And all this stuff I'd learned at uni, all this stuff I'd learned in my other iterations as a coach, and begin to apply it to hikers. And around that time, I also started this podcast. And lo and behold, absolutely would never have considered it, but people started listening to the podcast, and not just people in Sydney, but people all around the world, in US, in Canada, in Europe, all around the world. And I had people reaching out to me about help. And that's when I began to develop the sort of online side of things, which I do now. And I was like, okay, how can I take all this information I'm imparting face to face? All this sort of help I'm helping with people face to face, and how can I turn it into something that can help anywhere around the world? And that's kind of where the online summit program was born. And so the iteration of Summit Strength now. And now that I'm 29, almost 30, I've been doing Summit Strength for 3.5 years specifically, and it's grown from strength to strength. And I'm helping people all around the world in all different situations, and really taking information and taking things I've learned from all those different stages of my life and really applied it into this ultimate thing right now. And it's something that I absolutely love. So it's taken stuff from me being 16 years old, and I'm almost 30 now, so a good 14-year journey to really get me to where I am these days. But every single step along the way, I've taken something out of it, and it really has led me to where I am these days. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into sort of where I'm coming from as a coach. It's not something I've just sort of stepped into as a career change. It's not something I've just dabbled in, but it is my career. It's something I've been doing almost my entire life, and definitely my entire adult life. And all those skills, all that learning, all that information has really come to a head with Summit Strength. And I'm taking things I never thought I'd use in a million years and finding ways I can apply it to hikers. And it is honestly so much fun. So hopefully from all that, you can get a good insight into sort of where I'm coming from with all of this, who I am, what my background is, and why I firmly do believe that I am in an incredibly good position to help hikers for these adventures. And why I firmly believe, without sounding arrogant, though it may sound that, but I honestly do believe I am the single best person, in the single best position, I should say, to help hikers in their adventures than anyone in the world. That's something that I strive for, and it's something that I really do think I live up to. So, a little bit of insight, a little bit tooting my own horn there at the end, but you got to do it sometimes. But I hope you have enjoyed this episode, and I hope you have got some good information around where I'm coming from. Now, if you have been listening to this episode today, and you're like, you know what, Ron, this sounds pretty good to me. I can see you've gone through a journey. I can trust you with all of this. I feel like, I'm getting where you're coming from. And you were thinking, now might be the time where I get a little bit extra help. Now might be the time where I sort of discover a little bit more around Summit Strength. Now might be the time where I take the plunge into one of our online programs and see what 14 years of coaching has led to. I have something for you. Now, this week, I'm opening up enrollment for my signature program, which is the online summit program. Specifically, I'm looking for no more than 10 hikers who want to get strong and pain-free over the next 12 weeks so they can conquer every adventure. Now, if this sounds like you and you want to learn a little bit more about how this all works and if it might be a good fit for your situation, swing me an email to rowan@summitstrength.com.au or shoot me a message to Instagram at summitstrength.au. Shoot me a message, shoot me an email. We'll have a little bit of a chat and we'll really dive into and see if and how one of my programs might be a good fit for your goals and your situation. So if you have been thinking about it for a while, if you're leading up to a trip, if you've got an ache or pain that's been getting in your way, or you just want to get fitter for your local hikes, I would absolutely love to hear from you. Shoot me a message, we'll have a chat, and we'll go from there. So thank you very much for listening today, guys. I do hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.